Hello and welcome to the Cross Cultural Couples Podcast. My name is Erica El Halali,
And I am Hamada Al Hilali.
and today we're going to talk about attachment theory. We're going to talk about what it is, we'll go through the different types, and then we'll just talk about how it could impact your relationships, either with your partner or even it can impact relationships that you have with friends or even at work as well. So there's 4 adult attachment styles, and the first one is secure. The other 3 are actually insecure. They're called insecure styles. So the second one is anxious. It is also sometimes referred to as a preoccupied attachment style. The second one is avoidant. It's also referred to as dismissive. And then there's a disorganized style that's also referred to as fearful or avoidant. So these attachment styles there's really a long history in psychology for them. They've had a lot of different studies done on them. They're continuing to do research on it, so it's definitely a field that continues to grow, and there's a lot of research that's done on it. But ultimately what it boils down to is that one's relationship with your parents during childhood has an overarching influence on the social, intimate relationships and then relationships at work in the future. So this will go back to your parenting, whoever your parents were. What was that attachment that they had? How did that show up in your life? And some things that may be impacting you in your current relationship. So before we get into this, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about how different cultures view psychology. I know definitely in America, even generationally, our culture has definitely changed on this. And then even among the generations, like my mom's generation, as they've gotten older, they've been more open to psychology and getting insight that way. And then I think for my generation, our generation, most of us either grew up like in therapy. We knew people who were in therapy. We're much more comfortable and familiar with psychology, especially for people who have a mental health issue. But I think even just overall, I think a lot of us are looking at psychology to improve our overall well-being as well.
Honestly, for when I was growing up in Morocco, we didn't really have a lot of relationship with psychology, because I think a lot of people, even though they needed mental help, I don't think people took it as seriously as people taking it here in America. So yeah, I for sure encounter more psychology discussion here in the U.S. than in Morocco. Barely when you see somebody talking about it in Morocco, they just assume everybody's just normal.
Yeah, and I think that even just like away from the mental health discussion when it comes to like if you have a mental illness, I think that there's also this larger discussion now going on in America where it's like, how do we improve our overall well-being, and are there things in psychology that can
Help us.
help us overall be better? And so I think that pretty much everyone has some kind of exposure to psychology in America now, and they're familiar with some basic terms. I think there's still some stigma around it, but it's definitely nothing like it was even when I was growing up, or certainly not when my mom was growing up.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's been evolution.
For sure.
So the first one we're going to talk about is actually the secure attachment style. And the reason I want to start with this is what's considered like the most healthy. It'll allow you to have the most secure attachment. You won't have some of the issues that you find with an insecure attachment. So we'll go through that, and then we're also going to go through how you as a parent can help your child get this secure attachment. And then we'll talk about too, when we go through the other ones, things that may cause you to have an insecure attachment style. Excuse me. So there are, in the secure attachment style, it's really characterized by having a healthy relationship. And what this means is that as an adult, you can have a secure attachment to somebody else, whether that's a partner, a friendship, at work. The relationships are based on honesty, tolerance, and emotional closeness. So these tend to be people who thrive in their relationships. They don't necessarily have any fear of being on their own, so they're not necessarily in a codependent situation. They also do not depend on the responsiveness or approval of their partners, and they tend to have a positive view of themselves and others. So this is obviously the goal. I think one thing I want to say is you may not naturally have this as your attachment style. And first of all, that's totally okay. The first step is you want to acknowledge where you're at. And then it's also not your fault. Like maybe something happened with your parents that you had no control over as a child. Maybe your parents had something happen to them that was out of their control. So with all of these, there's no judgment. Like if you're this way, this is the only way you can be in a relationship. I think a lot of us will have some of these other insecure attachment styles, and we can identify it and then work on it and make progress so that when we're in our relationships, we're acting in that more secure attachment way. And also we can then break the cycles so that when we're parents, we can try to raise our kids with secure attachment. So there's really 5 conditions for raising a securely attached child, or also being raised as a secure attached child. So I'm going to have Hamada list those off.
So the first one is the child feels safe. I mean, the child explains itself. Okay, so childs need to feel secure and safe in their own environment, so as to flourish.
Yeah, so this especially happens when they're a baby or a toddler, and the child needs to know that there's not going to be any harm that comes to them. They're going to be fed, they're going to be kept warm. There's also, they're going to have a normal, healthy way to establish independence as well. So it's not, they don't even have to fear of like the overly nurtured either. There's a good balance there.
Yeah, the second one is the child feels seen and known.
Yeah, so this is really important. Like, I know there's a lot of discussion in parenting, even as far as like, should you let your child cry it out? Like, so just let them cry. They need to feel that that when they cry, when they coo, when they make these sounds, that they're going to be acknowledged. And they need to know that their caregiver is in tune with whatever their needs are. So this is really important. I mean, a lot of this stuff happens, during the first year even of the child's life. But it's really important that kids know that they're seen and they feel that they're known by their parent or their caregiver.
The third one is that the child feels comforted. So the word can sometimes be scary placed to small child. Therefore, it is essential for caregivers to be open, warm, and inviting in order to raise a securely attached child.
Yeah, so this is really important, especially as kids, as they grow up, that they're cared for. If they're upset, that you're comforting them as a parent, things like that.
The fourth one is the child feels valued. The process of developing healthy self esteem and value for who we are as a person starts in infancy. Caregivers should aim to express happiness and pride over who their child is rather than over what the child does.
Yeah, so I think this is another really important distinction. I know a lot of people, they may have like they want to please other people. They're constantly looking for that affirmation outside of themselves. That may come from, as a child, you did not feel valued. You weren't allowed to develop a healthy self-esteem. And so you may, even as a parent, I've started to think of things with Sammy like, I don't want to just value him for doing something. Like, I want to value him for who he is as a person. So I want him to know that it's not just like, oh, you're going to get a gold star if you do this every time. That he, as a human soul, is valued and loved just for who he is. And if he can go out in the world like that, then he'll feel valued for who he is as a person, and he won't necessarily look for those people pleasing behaviors, or looking for that external validation outside of himself.
Yeah, and the fifth one is the child feels support for being their best self.
Yeah, so this one is another really interesting one. I think that it's something that we don't necessarily always think of as parents, where, a lot of times, especially as a mom or working mom, sometimes you're just practically trying to get things done. But it's really important to know that your job as a parent is also to make the child know that you believe in them, you believe in their abilities, you're supporting them. If they want to try something and it goes wrong, that's okay. Like, that's how you grow, is you try things. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. If sometimes you'll see people, they have perfectionist tendencies, and a lot of times that's because as a child they weren't allowed to take a risk and try something new and grow. And so it's really important that as a parent you're really trying to support your child, um, and really encourage them to be their best authentic self.
I agree.
So that is really the secure attachment. If you're in a relationship with somebody who has a secure attachment, for example, I feel like Hamada has a pretty secure attachment. I mean, I don't know if anybody's like perfect on, I think there's a scale, but overall I would say he's a secure attachment. And for me, I don't think that I grew up that way. So, like, my father died when I was 11, and he was sick for most of my childhood before that. So I feel like I did have a lot of insecure attachment issues to work out and work through. And sometimes if you're in a relationship with somebody who has a secure attachment, that can really help you overcome and learn a new behavior to model. So we'll go through the three types of insecure attachments.
So the first insecure attachment is anxious or preoccupied. For adults with an anxious attachment style, the partner is often the better half.
Yeah, so this is like, a lot of times people will have this if they like will have a lot of anxiety if they're not with a partner, or if their partner is out with their friend, maybe they feel anxiety about that. A lot of times people with this attachment style, they can tend to have a negative self-image, but then they'll have almost like an overly positive view of others. So they'll view themselves just in total negative light, but then everyone around them as super positive. And so that can be a really hard one to overcome. There may be underlying issues of self-worth and self-esteem to work on. The anxious adult will often, they're seeking that approval, support, responsiveness. And so, like, if you're in a relationship with somebody who has this attachment style, you may almost feel like they're clingy because they're always looking for that validation from you, mainly because they're not finding it within themselves. So this one is this person will value their relationship very highly, mainly because they don't have a lot of worth within themselves just to be independent of a relationship. And a lot of times this can be a really hard relationship to be in if you're the other person, because this person is just constantly needing you. They're constantly having this anxiety. There may be a strong fear of abandonment. And really, underlying a lot of this, you have to realize safety will be a priority. So the partner is going to need to have a lot of reassurance. They're going to have to feel really safe in the relationship. So if you're doing anything that's making them question safety, that will make their anxiety even go higher. So if you're in a relationship with somebody like this, you may have to be extra cautious. And if you are the person who has this attachment style, I highly recommend that you work on some of the underlying causes of why do you need this external validation? Why do you feel that you don't have enough self-worth on your own? And I also would say that people who have this attachment style, it may be healthy for them to, as they're working on this, to spend some time not being in a relationship. Or if they are in a relationship, take a little break from it and just say, we're still married, we're still in this, but I'm working on this. Just set a really clear boundary and say, I need to work on my self-esteem for the next month or whatever. And then start really doing the work on that as well. And with this one, like with any of the insecure attachment styles, especially if there's any underlying trauma, if there's any underlying issues from childhood that haven't been dealt with, I highly recommend, getting some type of help for that, whatever form that is for you, whether you do it through like couples counseling, whether you do it you have a one-on-one session where you start to really dive into your own issues from childhood. I think it'll really help your overall relationship. And then the next insecure attachment style.
Yeah, it's called avoidant or dismissive. The dismissing avoidant type would often perceive themselves as lone wolves, strong, independent, and self sufficient. Not necessarily in terms of physical contact, but rather on an emotional level. The people have high self esteem and positive view of themselves.
And this one tends to be somebody who they don't necessarily feel like they need to be in a relationship to be complete. So it's almost like on the opposite end of the anxious preoccupied type. This type is somebody who is very much that lone wolf. They're ready to be on their own. This is a type that will avoid emotional closeness, and they'll also tend to suppress their feelings when they're faced with a potentially emotionally dense situation. So for me, I would say this is probably one I more closely identify with than the previous one. I think especially seeing what my mom went through and how she, here she was married, had 2 kids, and then her husband got sick and she was left alone. It made me always think like, I need to be self-reliant. I cannot rely on others. And so I definitely had a lot of avoidance issues where I didn't necessarily want to be emotionally available. I think even up until a month ago or so, I tended to be a little bit detached from my emotions, and I always basically was stuck more in the mind and not necessarily on the emotions. And I do feel this is something that I think a lot of people, if you've had any type of hurt, or you've had security issues where things haven't worked out, you may just feel like, well, I'll put a wall up around my heart and I'll be fine. And I will say that even if you think that you're suppressing your emotions are still there. They'll be taken on by the body. They'll be taken on through different parts of your psyche. And so it's really important to allow yourself space to feel your emotions. You may not be in a place where you can share it with somebody else right away, but you're going to want to have some space to feel your emotions, and then once you've figured out your heart on kind of your own self-love journey where you've allowed yourself to feel those emotions, then at that point then you can start sharing them with your partner. If you've been with somebody for a long time and you've had this style, and then all of a sudden you're super touchy feely, I would give them a heads up that you're doing work to open your heart, that you're doing work to be more emotionally connected, so that they know that that's going to come up for you, and that they may start to see you be more expressive emotionally than you have been in the past.
Okay. So the third one is called disorganized, fearful-avoidant. The disorganized type tends to show unstable and ambiguous behaviors in their social bonds. Yeah, for adults with his style of attachment. For adults with this style of attachment, the partner and the relationship themselves are often the source of both desire and fear. So,
Yeah, and so this person, they want intimacy and closeness, but then at the same time, they'll experience trouble trusting and depending on others. They also may not regulate their emotions well, and they may avoid strong emotional attachment. And this is really out of the fear of getting hurt. So, this one is a lot of times people will have this if they've had some kind of trauma, one of their parents has hurt them. There may also be a fear if you are somebody who lost a parent as a child. You may fear abandonment. You may have different fears that come up. And one thing I wanted to point out too is that 1 in 7 Americans actually lose a parent or sibling before the age of 20.
it's crazy.
So there's quite a few people that have lost a parent or even a sibling, before the age of 20. So there's a lot of us out there, people who did lose a parent as a child. And so there is, if you're in a relationship with somebody like that, or if you yourself have that, that is definitely a wound from childhood you're going to have to acknowledge, you're going to have to work through. There's grief associated with that, but then it will also show up in your attachment styles as well. So, and again, that's nothing that you did or your parent did.
Yeah.
There's things that happen in life that are out of your control, but that is definitely one that is definitely a harder wound for a lot of people to overcome. I mean, there's certainly a lot of other wounds that can come up. For the first one we talked about, the anxious or ambivalent attachment style. This one is one where you may have inconsistency from a caregiver. So, for example, if you have a parent who wasn't responsible, there wasn't that structured routine in your life, you may have this attachment style. You may you may have been neglected as a child, even if it wasn't intentional neglect. So, for example, maybe there's a baby, as a baby you cried for affection, and on some occasions they would run and coddle you and cater to your needs, and on other occasions they would say, oh, they can self-soothe. So this is one where you may have just unpredictability. So because there's just an overall lack of consistency as a child, that's kind of what you expect as an adult. You just assume people in your life are unpredictable. You can't rely on them. You don't have any consistency. So the other thing too is that may come up is if you have this attachment style, in addition to having inconsistent and unpredictability from your parents or caregivers, you may have had a parent that was more aware of their own needs than their child's needs. So you may have had a parent that put their own needs above yours. And this is one where, as you become an adult and then you're in a relationship and you become a parent, that may bring up new things for you. You may almost overreact and be like, well, I'm going to always 100% be there for my kid because I didn't have that from my parents. And I do stress that it's really important to have a balanced approach with this. Like, there's times where kids need to have that chance to be independent and figure things out on their own. But if they know that you're always there for them, like if they need help, they can ask for it.
Yeah.
But they need to also be allowed the time to give it a try and be able to try to figure it out on their own. You may have also had parents that were just unreliable. So sometimes, like, for example, let's say your parents got divorced and your dad always said, oh, I'm going to pick you up on Friday nights and we're going to have pizza. And maybe he did it once a month, but not every Friday night, like he said. Or maybe he didn't do it at all. So then you just started to believe, well, I can't rely on him. Like, I don't know. Whatever he says isn't going to be reliable. So that's why it's really important as parents to be honest with your kids. Like, if you're telling your kids all the time, like, oh, I'm going to take you to Disneyland, and then you don't because you don't have enough money, just be honest with your kids and say, we don't have money to go to Disneyland. As soon as we do, we'll take you or whatever, but right now we can't do it. Instead of telling them you're going to do something and then not doing it. So being really honest with your kids is going to help them as they grow older in their own relationships. And then you may have also had parents who were loving and affectionate on some occasions, but punitive on others. So this may have happened, especially if your parent isn't stable. Maybe certain times they would react with like ecstasy and like super happy for you and everything. And then other times they reacted like completely opposite. They like punished you, they grounded you, you just didn't know what was going on. So this is why like having structure and consistency is really important as a parent, because if you don't, then you'll have this attachment style of anxious ambivalence. I also think just overall it's really important that no matter what culture you're in, you start looking at how was your partner raised, what was their parents' parenting style like, what was your parenting style like, and then when you become parents, you can start looking at what do I need to do to have this secure attachment with my child, and what does this mean? Like, so in daily behaviors, does this mean like we're going to have a consistent routine? We're going to, if we say we're going to do something, we do it because we want to have that consistency.
I agree.
So there's a lot of things you can do as a parent to make it easier for your child, no matter what culture you're in. These are things that are universal.
Cool.
Yeah, so, and I think overall, just, I want to really emphasize, no matter what your attachment style is, it doesn't make you a bad person, or like if you're having relationship trouble and maybe your partner is secure and you grew up with an avoidant attachment style or whatever, it doesn't mean that all the relationship problems are your fault. Like, I don't think that blame game is healthy dynamic in any relationship. So I think it's really important to just honor where both of you came from. You obviously both were attracted to each other from different styles. And then just really, really know what your partner's attachment style is and try to help them. Like, figure out, what can I do to make them feel more secure? What do I need to do to make them feel more self-worth? I don't think you yourself can fix them, but there's different things you can do to give them the relationship dynamics to help. So, like, if your partner has self-worth issues, don't be overly critical of them. Don't sit there and, like, judge them constantly. They have enough of that in their own head. They don't need you adding to it. If your partner is avoidant and doesn't want to open up emotionally, what can you do to try to ask a probing question or make them feel safe enough that it is okay for them to share emotionally, that it's a safe space for them to do that.
Sure.
And then if your partner is somebody who has an unpredictable attachment style where things have been inconsistent for them, what can you do to always be consistent for them? What can you do to show them that, okay, consistently, this is what I want? I think most people I meet are not in the secure attachment style field, as far as their type of attachment style.
Hmm.
At least most of the people that I've encountered, I think I've seen a lot of people who've done work though to get from one of those insecure attachment style. They've put in the work and now they're able to operate in their relationships from that secure place. So I do think it's important to know that we're all works in progress. We can always be growing and changing, and this is just one way for you to analyze your childhood, figure out what dynamics that may be causing in your relationship, and really start to honor each other's attachment styles and figure out what you can do to go to that secure style, and then as parents make the conditions for your children that way.
I agree.
So with that, we wanna make sure you guys know about our Instagram account. It's at Cross Cultural Couples. Make sure you reach out to us with any questions you have. This may have brought up past issues. This may have caused you any concerns. Whatever, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd also really love to hear about what types of content you guys like to hear from us. So we kind of just will put out there what's interesting to us. But if there's a specific topic or question or issue you guys have, reach out to us. We would love to hear from you, and we'd love for you to follow us and engage with us. We love hearing from you guys, and we love seeing so many beautiful cross-cultural couples out there. There are definitely more of us and growing every day, as the trends will show. And so we really want to be a community of people where we celebrate that love comes from all shapes, sizes, geographies, religious backgrounds, skin colors, whatever. Love is really the ultimate uniter of humanity, and we really want to celebrate all the cross-cultural couples out there. So please connect with us, engage with us. You can also reach out to us on our website at crossculturalcouples.com. And if you guys can, please leave a review for us on whatever podcasting platform you guys are on. That just helps us get the word out for all the cross-cultural couples out there.
Thank you. Thank you so much and have a great day. And again, thank you for listening.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye bye.